Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today I want to take a look at the always popular and elegant form of poetry known as haiku. So there's something about this time of year when it's very cold and dark and a little gloomy. I always tend to gravitate towards haiku poetry. The form is so simple and calm and uh, beautiful. It's really fitting, I think, for these cold winter months when we're waiting for spring to come. We kind of need something to kind of lighten things up a bit. And whenever I'm reading haiku or working on writing haiku poetry myself, it always just puts me at ease. It puts me in a really good state of mind. And typically in the evenings on a winter weeknight, I'll just sit with a piece of paper and a pen and put on some classical music and you just try writing a piece of haiku poetry and see where it goes. So basically, when you're writing haiku, you just need to follow a few simple steps. The poem itself is going to be 3 lines. The lines are very short. The first line is going to be 5 syllables. The second line will be 7 syllables. And then the third line will be 5 syllables. And then from there, you can really write about whatever you want. You know, they can be autobiographical, they can be historical, they can be humorous, they can be nonsensical. We go through life and we just kind of encounter these little moments in time, and a haiku poem often aims to just capture that moment. And you could see the brevity of the poem itself, of the form, almost as a metaphor for these brief, lingering moments that are with us for just a few seconds and then they just drift away into the ether. And a haiku poem, in a way, aims to capture and then preserve those moments so they're not lost to us in time. And that's one of the really beautiful things about the form. So I'm going to read to you now just an example of a really great haiku poem. This one is by one of the absolute legends of the format. It's Matsuo Basho. He was a Japanese poet in the 17th century. So here's one of his masterworks that I absolutely love. Awake at night, the sound of the water jar cracking in the cold. So what I love about this is that we start with this image, awake at night. It's something that is kind of universal. Everyone can relate to lying in bed, not being able to sleep. And then we learn that it's cold out. And so it becomes even more relatable because we now know we're lying awake because it's cold. Then there's something so kind of forlorn and lonely about lying in bed in the middle of a cold night awake. This very alienating, lonely experience, but we can all kind of unite over it in the poem itself because we have all experienced that ourselves. And then the poem gets even more specific with the sense of the cold, and we can almost feel the cold, and then the jar that just cracks, and so we can hear that jar. The emotion, the loneliness of being awake at night, combined then with the feeling of the cold, and then the sound of the jar cracking. And it's that specificity of those 3 things that I think make this such a powerful poem. As one that I return to all the time, especially this time of year. Another thing I like about haiku is the compressed form, I think, helps with other forms of writing. It's almost a practice for flash fiction and other types of short stories where you have to condense something down to its essential parts. You could almost look at haiku as a microcosm for the short story where you have to make every word count. And I think if you get in the habit of writing haiku and thinking about large ideas and how to express them in as few words as possible, then when you move on to the narrative of the short story, you'll be a little more prepared for just exactly what you'll need to do as far as expressing that narrative in as few words as possible. So even though I practice haiku, I don't think I'm very good at it yet. I'm still kind of figuring out what type of haiku I like to write. For now, I do stick more to kind of image-based haiku and nature-based haiku. And I do want to broaden my scope a bit and get more philosophical and strange with my haiku, but for now I'm keeping it pretty simple. With that being said, I would like to share with you some of the haiku poems I have been working on, and again, they're by no means perfect, but I do hope you enjoy them. So with this image, the idea was that I would be in a garden shed and looking around, and then it starts to rain and you wait out the rainstorm in the garden shed. I think what's wrong with this haiku is that it's missing core emotion, and it's almost too specific in the situation. And I think if you have to explain the haiku like I do here, I think there's something wrong with it. Still, I like the situation of being in a garden shed and there's an impending storm, so that's why I wrote it. And it's not a great poem, but it works for me. All right, so you'll notice here that the third line is actually 6 syllables instead of 5. I don't think it's a huge issue if you stray away from the standard syllable rules every so often. And with this particular haiku, I really liked the image of a truck driving down the road, and it's a little slick on the pavement, and the wheels kind of slide off the road a little bit, and apples that are piled up in the bed of the truck come tumbling out and roll down the pavement and down the hill. And I really like that image, and I think it's a good idea to follow the classic syllable structure, but if you need to deviate it from it for the sake of the image, I think it's fine. Jack Kerouac was a famous haiku poet, and he constantly broke the rules of haiku. But at the same time, when we look at classic American writers who wrote haiku, people always mention Kerouac, so I kind of turn to him as my justification for breaking the rules here. All right, and this last one here, it's a very timely image. We're right in the tail end of winter, but spring is definitely not here. Things are very gray and gloomy and desolate, and that's kind of what this captures. However, I think it's also a beautiful image, and I think if you pay attention to it, you'll find plenty of things to appreciate. And I think it's amazing how something so dead can seem just so alive. And I think this one harkens back to the Matsuo Bansho haiku that I read earlier, and that it combines seeing and hearing. I mean, you see the gray, desolate sky and the barren field, and then you hear the crunch of the pine cone. And I personally really like that combination. I think it packs a punch and makes the poem feel a little more alive. All right, so that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed this topic. If you've never tried writing haiku before, I strongly encourage you to give it a try. It's a really fulfilling and rewarding form, and I always come away feeling a little better if I've read a piece of haiku or tried writing some myself. Please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And that's all I've got for today, so we'll see you next time.